Our top story this hour: a fragile truce appears to be holding in Sudan as Western and African nations race against time to evacuate nationals escaping the fighting. The British government is prioritizing families with children and vulnerable groups like the sick and elderly. The evacuations come amid growing fears of a civil war as the army and RSF paramilitary vie for control. Arise News chief correspondent John Cookson has the story.
Safe at last, dozens of Kenyans airlifted out of Sudan by a military mercy flight, and a clearly traumatized businesswoman glad to be back on Kenyan soil.
I thank God because I'm home finally. I've gone through a lot of trauma in Sudan.
Yes.
And I walked from my apartment when the shooting was still going on, because I really wanted to utilize the 72-hour ceasefire, and I managed to walk between those people
Thank God.
without any harm.
Okay.
This is Djibouti, where flights are arriving day and night as the airlift of thousands gathers momentum. Rescued British citizens have criticised the government, saying it's been too slow to act.
By now it's 6-7 days into the conflict and you're thinking, come on, what's our government going to do for us? The same message comes through: sit tight, sit tight, sit tight. They're still being told today to sit tight. As Brits trapped in Khartoum, they must be asking themselves, why have we been left?
Among the evacuated, young children like an Irish girl, Nadine, reliving the trauma of Khartoum.
It was scary because all of us, we had to sleep on the floor and we were scared of bullets coming in. And then one time we were all sitting in the sitting room and we were relaxed, we were watching TV, a documentary. And then all of a sudden, poof, and we thought a bullet hit our window or a bomb, because our window started shaking and it was so loud and it scared us.
And still they come, a race against time before the truce expires. But in the past, ceasefires have not held. Each faction, one led by General Burhan and the other by General Dagalo, blaming the other.
It is important to remember that ceasefires have been announced and have fallen apart in the past, so the situation remains dangerous, volatile, and unpredictable. I've spoken either directly or through intermediaries with the leaders of the factions on the ground, calling for them to allow British nationals, dual nationals and minors to be evacuated, and we will continue to push for the maintenance of this ceasefire.
Today, Khartoum remains volatile, with reports of sporadic gunfire despite the truce, but thousands are making it to safety. John Cookson, Arise News.
John Cookson joins us for more from London. John, thank you so much for joining us again on Newsday. What are you hearing about how the evacuation is going?
Hi there, great to be on Newsday as always. Well, the evacuation, as I said in my report, sort of going on round the clock now. I can tell you that the Brits have one particular RAF Hercules plane carrying 100 people has made 2 trips now between Cyprus and Khartoum. The Brits have also got a bigger plane in action now, a KC-2 RAF plane, much bigger, able to carry 300 of these evacuees. That's just arrived in Sudan, and other European countries are also conducting their own evacuations, and many of them through Djibouti. I've been trying to find out about the Nigerians. Now, as you may know, there are about 5,500 Nigerians stranded in the country, and the evacuation of them was supposed to get underway today. probably a long bus drive from Khartoum to Egypt or perhaps Port Sudan. I haven't been able to find out anything about whether the evacuation of Nigerians has started, but I'll stay across that one. On the ground, it seems that things, as the British Foreign Secretary, Mr. Cleverly, said, things are very volatile. There are the sounds of gunfire from time to time, despite the ceasefire. But generally speaking, the truce seems to be holding for now. The truce came into effect at 11 p.m. London and Nigeria time last night and runs for 3 days. Now, truces have fallen down 4 times in the past. So things are pretty much on a knife edge at the moment. But as far as the evacuations are concerned, it's sort of full steam ahead at the moment, especially getting Western nations and African nations, citizens, out of the country as fast as they can. But as I say, no word yet on the status of Nigerians at the moment.
Well, some Western governments have been criticized for being slow to get citizens out. Is that fair?
I would say not a fair criticism. For example, there are about 4,000 British people in Sudan or waiting to be evacuated. Some have already been evacuated, but that's a huge number of people, especially from a city like Khartoum, which is very dangerous at the moment. There's a question of getting all those numbers of people to muster points and then to this air base that I mentioned during our chat yesterday, about 10 kilometers north of downtown. And in effect, it's a war zone that we're talking about here. So it is a very dangerous operation. And the slowness, I wouldn't criticize, because they have to take all the risks into account and try to counter those risks and make sure that people are not killed on the way to muster points. Some Turkish citizens were shot at yesterday as they tried to be evacuated. So in this kind of environment, although perhaps there's been some criticism for getting diplomats out first and leaving the citizens behind, it's just the vast number of citizens that have to get out from a war zone that is a logistical nightmare. 4,000 Brits, 16,000 Americans, 5,500 Nigerians. That's a lot of people to get out of a war zone.
Indeed. Now, the UN is meeting this afternoon to debate the Sudan crisis. What are we likely to hear?
Well, we heard from the Secretary General Guterres yesterday that the UN is firmly committed to Sudan. He said, "We are not leaving Sudan. We stand with the people of Sudan." And we'll hear some more pledges of support today. And although words are very fine, it perhaps doesn't help the people on the ground, but it does send a clear message that the UN's view is that this conflict must come to an end. We'll hear calls perhaps from South Sudan, which has an arms embargo imposed by the Security Council since 2018. They'll call for the arms embargo to be lifted. The UN is not going to do that because of the volatile situation in the north in Sudan. There may be some criticism of Russia. Russia, of course, chairing the Security Council at the moment. Russian forces are clandestine forces, mercenaries, are thought to be backing one faction in this conflict, the RSF, and then we may hear criticism of that today in the Security Council meeting.
All right, then. I mean, the U.S. Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, has confirmed that Sudan's warring generals have agreed to the 72-hour ceasefire. So what are the long-term prospects for peace in Sudan?
Not good, I would say. We have General Burhan, head of the army, effectively the president of Sudan, and then we have this other general, General Dagalo, also known as Hemedti, heading this special forces faction. And, they're slugging it out like two boxers in a ring at the moment. And it's a question of, who wins the fight. Not only that, they're backed by different countries in the region. Egypt, for example, backing General Burhan. Countries like the UAE, Saudi Arabia, backing the RSF. The reason why it's so important to countries outside of Sudan is that Sudan is rich in minerals, especially gold. It has access to oil from South Sudan, and strategically occupies a very important place in the world on the east of Africa. So a lot of factors, a lot of international players, a lot of actors getting involved in this, and it's so easy now for the violence to spill over into neighbouring countries like Eritrea, Ethiopia, Egypt, Libya, Chad, and South Sudan.
Well said. Arise Chief Correspondent John Cookson, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday. We appreciate your time and analysis as always.